President of Seattle University, Vice Chancellor of OP General, the many distinguished professors and professionals on the stage, Professor who gave me a very long and very gracious introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for inviting me and for attending today. The good news is I changed my flight and I'm here. The bad news is I didn't prepare anything to say. So I'm just going to pick up a few things from what was already talked about today. And first I must start with a bit of a nostalgic series of comments. I went to the US when I just turned 21 years old, and I ended up getting 3 degrees over the course of 10 or 15 years from 2 different universities. And I was a reluctant traveler. If my father had not forced me, I was not keen to go overseas actually. But when I went there, I adapted so well, partly because of the culture, partly because of the nature of education. After being in the public eye for a long time, I really thrived on being relatively anonymous in the US. I also took to the system of education, which was much more about inquiry and development as opposed to rote learning, even in an institution of the quality of REC Trichy, where I studied. I remember that one of the best features of the education system in the US is its fit with the economy, with the needs of industry. The ratio, at least back in the day, of the people who would get employed after getting degrees from most good universities was very high. Relatively speaking, things have changed quite a bit in both the US and in India. Though I'm pretty far removed from the US these days, from what I can read, I think there's been a dilution of the notion of college education through a lot of kind of correspondence-based education, a lot of student loan leveraging, and the overall quality has come down even as the quantity has gone up. In Tamil Nadu in particular, I don't want to comment about the rest of India. In Tamil Nadu in particular, we've had somewhat of a different effect. We've gone from super exclusive to almost too broad-based. For those of you who may know, the gross enrollment ratio in tertiary education in Tamil Nadu last year touched about 51.6%. That is, almost 1 in 2 children of college-going age enroll in a college in Tamil Nadu. For India, that average is about 26 or 27%, and the number 2 state is Kerala, somewhere in the mid-30s or high 30s. There are many good things about that. There are many very complicated fallout of that statistic. But broadly, I would say that the education system in a country reflects the society, whether it's a state or a country actually. Because India is such a disparate country, and because every state has a different language, a different culture, a different history to some extent. I mean, we've been a country for about 75 years. Our cultures are all thousands of years old. The system very much adapts to the local culture. In the case of the US, at least the US that I remember, where I lived from 1987 till 2007, it reflected this notion of a diversity of views, a democracy based on dialogue and debate, and most of all, an openness and a frankness. I remember the thing that struck me the most about the US was that people said what they meant and they meant what they said. There was very little subterfuge and needing to cloak your ambitions. And, it was okay to say, I want to get rich, I want to beat you, and that's basically why I work so hard. It was very, not in the Indian culture to say those things. And I think there's a certain efficiency in market transactions or in human interactions that comes with that kind of openness, which we still don't have. But, things change all the time. Nothing stays the same. I would say what I have observed over the years is that the participation of Indian students in US universities, for that matter in global education, has risen exponentially. Partly as the world has become more integrated, partly as the purchasing power and the per capita incomes of Indians have grown a lot. And some of it is for the good, particularly in places like US, we find almost everybody who goes there to get an education at least has a reasonable chance of participating in the economy post that education. In other places, that is not so true, particularly in places like the United Kingdom, where the scale of the economy doesn't match the scale of the educational platforms they have or the ancestral or legacy universities they have. So there's a natural fit, I would say, between the US and India in that respect as well. And even as we are happy and somewhat proud about the quantity increase, we are in a quality bind, and that is the reality. When I graduated from engineering in 1987, I think the state of Tamil Nadu produced somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 engineers from 7 or 8 colleges. Today there are 200 plus colleges. I think about 250,000 plus seats, of which maybe 150, 160,000 get filled. So when I came back to India, the first question I asked was, who teaches all these students? Because you don't really have in less than 30 years, if you go from 4,000 students to 150,000 students, clearly you have not had the time to build up the teaching capacity, particularly because in the days of, when I went to college, about 70% of all the top engineering school students migrated permanently overseas. Anyway, we are trying to fix the quality problem in many ways, as you may have heard of the Chief Minister's kind of top priority program called Non-Mudalvan, where we're trying to make people more economy ready broadly through skilling, through language development, through adaptation to different models. And there are many models of the economy. There's not only the US model or the Indian model. For example, we have tied up with a lot of German institutions where they have a very different model of training and education, including a significant skill training track through apprenticeship and to relatively high paying, in fact, very high paying, high skilled, non-formal education, more professional education tracks. So even as we progress along all these things, I want to just talk about 2 or 3 ideas that come to me. The first is talking of Jesuit education in particular, and more broadly, the role of Christian missionaries in the education and, in fact, the health infrastructure and development of Tamil Nadu, probably in India, but I'll speak only for Tamil Nadu. It is a huge seminal contribution. If you go to Madurai or to Chennai or to Kanyakumari or Nagarkoil or any of these places, there are institutions that go back 100, 150 years that have been key contributors to bringing education. And at least in the case of Madurai and the southern districts, the missionaries from America, who basically ran what is now the CSI institutions, the mission hospitals, the Vellore, CMC, the many medical colleges and hospitals have done, immeasurable service. And many of them actually lived and died here and are buried in cemeteries in places like Madurai. So every opportunity I get in a country that is otherwise being kind of torn apart a little bit, I point out how we have benefited historically from the selfless service of others, particularly of the Christian missions. The second is that I want to take up the point of inclusivity and talk a little bit. In fact, I had the good fortune earlier this year of a visit from the director of the NSF in the US, Sedaraman Panchanathan. And he told me something I was so very happy to hear about. He said, I have been on this mission that says excellence should not require exclusivity. So this notion that even as you strive for, the pursuit of excellence in any field, in any research, in any endeavor, it should not turn out to be something where only a few can get access and you pride yourself that I take only 1 in 4,000 applications or 400 applications or whatever. There's got to be a way of keeping it inclusive. And that, of course, goes very well in alignment with the notions of the Dravidian movement in terms of access for everybody, social justice, In fact, so far as all the way up to reservations in the communal GO 1921, based on the percentage of the population as a way of leveling the field and giving access to all. And I think in our government, we take this very seriously. Even though we have a 52% gross enrollment ratio, we discovered that though the graduating class of high school is close to 50%, and in the urban areas more than 50% women, in fact, my constituency, the voters are more than 50% women. When it comes to enrollment in colleges, that drops dramatically. And in particular, it drops dramatically for the poorer families who attend the government schools. So there were already some efforts, which were indirect efforts like wedding assistance and so forth, that had a component of education built into it. And this year, because of some legacy problems, those programs are not working well. We scrapped that program and we have completely renamed the program as Pudumai Pen Thittam. And what we do is we provide a scholarship, 1,000 rupees a month scholarship, to any girl who has studied in government schools up to 10th and then goes to Polytechnic or ITI, or up to 12th and then goes to college education for as long as they're in college. We give them the scholarship. So we directly encourage their participation. And I'm very pleased to say that at last week's quarterly state level bankers committee meeting, which I've taken the habit of attending as a special invitee every 3 months, we got the statistics that all the previous years who were eligible, second year, third year, fourth year, professional course, all of them together were only about 1,60,000 applications. But this year's graduating class alone was almost 1 lakh. So from a ratio perspective, one or both of two things are true. One, a lot more people are aware of it because of its publicity now when they're coming out of school and therefore they're applying. It doesn't seem very likely. Much more likely, many more people who would not have applied to go to college, now that they are getting the scholarship, are able to go to college and not have to, just stay home. So we think we're achieving the impact that we'd like to see. We do a lot of other things to encourage education. Of course, in a state like ours, we must first focus on primary education and nutrition. But given where we've reached on tertiary education, we want to also continue to improve the participation of all segments of society into those programs. Finally, I must say that I'm very happy to hear of the two agreements today. My association with Loyola College goes not so deep. I'm not an alumnus, but I think I go for some function or the other every few months. And I think about 3 or 4 days ago, I was there with Dr. Arun attending some colloquium. So I'm very happy to see that you go from strength to strength. I should also mention my old family friend who I did not know was going to be here, Anuradha Ganesan. So I'm very thrilled to see that her institution is one of those that have signed up this agreement. I'm sure it'll be mutually beneficial for everybody involved. So with that, let me conclude what I hope was not very disjointed remarks off the top of my head, but thank you again for this opportunity. I'm very excited to see the level of engagement and the number of senior administrators and faculty who are here from Seattle. I hope the dialogue will be more enlightening than my remarks. Thank you.